blessed country where I was born, there was a fair maid dwelling, made all the lads cry well a day. Her name was Barbara Allen. 'Twas in
At Chrighton Abbey by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. The Chrichtons were very great people in that part of the country where my childhood and youth were spent. To speak of Squire Chrighton was to speak of a power in that remote western region of England. Chrighton Abbey had belonged to the family ever since the reign of King Stephen, and was of noble and palatial proportions. Altogether, the abbey was a very splendid mansion and one of the chief glories of our county. I was a Chrighton, and my father, a distant cousin of the reigning squire, had been rector of Chrighton parish. His death left me utterly unprovided for, and I was fain to go out into the bleak unknown world and earn my living in a position of dependence, a dreadful thing for a Chrighton to be obliged to do. I made it my business to seek employment abroad, where the degradation of one solitary Chrighton was not so likely to inflict shame upon the ancient house to which I belonged. Happily for myself, I had been carefully educated, and I was so fortunate as to obtain a situation at Vienna in a German family of high rank. Here I remained 7 years, laying aside a considerable portion of my salary. When my pupils had grown up, my kind mistress procured me a still more profitable position at St. Petersburg, where I remained 5 more years, at the end of which time I yielded to a yearning that had been long growing upon me to see my dear old country home once more. My mother had died some years before my father. My only brother was far away in the Indian civil service. Sister I had none. I was 33 years of age. Youth was quite gone, beauty I had never possessed, and I was content to think of myself as a confirmed old maid, a quiet spectator of life's great drama, disturbed by no feverish desire for an active part in the play. The dear ones who had given a special charm and brightness to my existence were gone. Nothing could recall them, and without them actual happiness seemed impossible to me. But I was a Chrighton, and I loved the soil from which I had sprung. I was encouraged by the very cordial letters from the squire's wife. Mrs. Chrighton begged that whenever I felt myself justified in coming home, I would pay a long visit to the abbey. "I wish you could come at Christmas," she wrote in the autumn of the year of which I am speaking. "We shall be very gay, and I expect all kinds of pleasant people at the abbey. Edward is to be married early in the spring. His fiancée is to be among our guests. She is a very beautiful girl, perhaps I should say handsome rather than beautiful. Julia Tremaine, one of the Tremaines of Old Court near Hazewell. She has a considerable fortune left her by an aunt, and is thought quite an heiress in the county. It is, I hope and believe, a thorough love match on both sides." This letter decided me. So early in December I turned my face homewards and made the long journey from St. Petersburg. The old abbey was in its glory when I arrived there, at about 9 o'clock on a clear, starlit night. A light frost whitened the broad sweep of grass that stretched away from the long stone terrace in front of the house. From the music room at the end of the southern wing to the heavily framed Gothic windows of the old rooms on the north, there shone one blaze of light. The scene reminded me of some weird palace in a German legend, and I half expected to see the lights fade out all in a moment, and the long stone facade wrapped in sudden darkness.